remain missing. Well, our top story today, and Pope Francis has passed away at the age of 88. The Vatican has announced that a public prayer for Pope Francis will take place in St. Peter's Square, inviting the faithful to gather and honour his legacy. The Vatican announced that Pope Francis's body may be transferred to St. Peter's Basilica for public homage on the 23rd of April. However, the same has not been confirmed yet. Meanwhile, tributes are pouring in from world leaders. Canadian Prime Minister Mark Carney paid tribute to Pope Francis, praising his moral clarity, spiritual courage and compassion. While Brazil's President Luiz Inácio Lula da Silva praised Pope Francis for championing climate action, social justice and challenging unjust economic models with courage, empathy and simplicity. Dr. Congo President Felix Tshisekedi honoured Pope Francis, praising his unwavering commitment to peace, justice and human dignity, and describing him as a great servant of God and a vibrant testament of faith and humility. Talking about the early life of the Pope, he was born in as Jorge Mario Bergoglio on December the 17th in 1936 in Buenos Aires, Argentina, and grew up in a working class family of Italian descent. He studied chemical engineering before deciding to join the Society of Jesus in 1958. He was ordained a priest in 1969, and his religious life was marked by deep intellectual formation and pastoral work. He became the Archbishop of Buenos Aires in 1998 and was made a cardinal in 2001. On March the 13th, 2013, after the resignation of Pope Benedict XVI, Bergoglio was elected as the 266th Pope of the Catholic Church, taking the name Pope Francis. His election was notable for being the first Pope from the Americas and the first Jesuit Pope. Well, joining us to discuss these developments and this breaking news, of course, that we have been rolling all day is Cynthia Matthews, CJ, an advocate and human rights activist joining us from Buxar in India. Cynthia, thank you ever so much for being here with us. A lot of the messages that we've heard from world leaders and seen from supporters of Pope Francis have spoken about his humanitarian work and outreach. What more can you tell us about what Pope Francis did during his time as the Pontiff?
Thank you for this invitation to join you. First of all, I pray that the Lord may grant eternal rest to the soul of our beloved Pope Francis. Yes, today we are lost an iconic Pope, a revolutionary, compassionate and peace-loving leader. It's a loss not only for the Catholic Church, but also for the whole world. The Holy Father is an exemplary example for all the leaders in the world. We are saddened by his demise. I am grateful to God for giving us such a great shepherd in the person of Pope Francis. Yes, we all know that Pope Francis is deeply admired for his commitment to humanity, especially for those on the margins of the society. He made the poor the central focus of his papacy, urging the church to become a poor church for the poor. He used to frequently visit slums, prisons, refugee camps, and war zones, bringing global attention to those forgotten by society. If we look at his own personal life, we see how he declined many of the luxurious papal privileges and chose to live in a modest Vatican guest house rather than the apostolic palace. He lived the values of the gospel, not just preaching, but practicing it in his very own life. He was a true follower of Christ, I would say, who was poor, humble, and merciful. And we know his environmental leadership is really commendable. He authored Laudato Si, an encyclical on the environmental and climate change. He called for urgent action against global warming, stressing that care for the planet is a moral, spiritual responsibility. He played a major role in shaping faith-based engagement with the Paris Climate Agreement. He was a person for all and for all seasons. He once said, "To change the world, we must be good to those who cannot repay us." That spirit really shaped everything he did.
Yes, Cynthia, of course, Pope Francis's outreach was felt worldwide, given the fact that he spoke out for Catholics and non-Catholics. What legacy does he leave behind in that front?
So Pope Francis will be remembered not just for what he taught, but how he lived and who he reached. He leaves behind a legacy of mercy, humility, and inclusion. As we know, he was a pope for the margins. His consistent outreach to the poor, refugees, prisoners, people with disabilities, and victims of injustice showed a church that walks with the suffering, not above them. Pope Francis insisted that the church must go to the existential peripheries, places of poverty, war, and exclusion, and not just remain in safe centers of power. And we know he has visited slums in Kenya, Brazil, refugee camps in Greece and Bangladesh, war zones in the Central African Republic and Ukraine. So he lived what he preached. This is what he said, I quote, "You pray for the hungry, then you feed them." That's how prayer works. So he leaves behind a legacy of strong global peace builder. He reached out to atheists, Jews, Buddhists, and people of all faiths with the message that our shared humanity comes first. He frequently condemned religious fundamentalism and promoted dialogue, listening, and peace building. Pope Francis became a global moral voice, reaching far beyond the borders of the Catholic Church. So with his groundbreaking encyclical Laudato Si, as I mentioned earlier, Pope Francis became a global leader on climate and environmental justice. He called the planet our common home, linking ecological destruction with the social inequality. He inspired movements among young people, faith communities, and even policy leaders to treat climate change as a moral emergency. The co-facilitator of the United Nations Sustainable Development Goals in 2015, when they were negotiating for the SDG goals, they had acknowledged Pope Francis' encyclical Laudato Si as a significant moral and ethical contribution to global development discussions. Pope Francis' concept of integral ecology introduced in this encyclical underscores the interconnectedness of social, economic, and environmental issues. This holistic approach aligns with the SDGs, Sustainable Development Goals, emphasis on addressing multiple dimensions of development simultaneously. The encyclical's influence was evident during the adoption of the 2030 Agenda for Sustainable Development, where its moral imperative contributed to the ease of consensus among United Nations member states.
Yes.
In his address to
Cynthia, I'm sorry to interrupt you. We are unfortunately out of time, but thank you very much for